to stay.
Hello and welcome back to Beyond Boards, a podcast dedicated to the actions and interests of skaters beyond skateboarding. My guest today, Sophie Friedel, picked up skateboarding as a young adult in Cornwall. Between 2009 and 2012, Sophie traveled to Kabul 3 times to volunteer, among other things, as an English teacher, skateboard instructor, and program coordinator at Skateistan. In 2015, she published her first book, The Art of Living Sideways, Skateboarding, Peace and Elicitive Conflict Transformation, based on her Master of Arts thesis. Since 2018, Sophie has been pioneering the use of skateboarding in mental health care with a scholarship in Germany. She is a qualified Gestalt therapist, and her project Drop In Ride Out combines skateboarding and Gestalt therapy. She says it is rooted in the idea that mental health isn't something only treated behind closed doors, but something we build together through awareness, movement, joy, challenge, and community. So here's my conversation with Sophie. I hope you'll enjoy it. Yeah, I was wondering if you could just tell me and the listeners about growing up and how skateboarding came into the picture. I know it came, I think I read somewhere that you started actually around 20 or 21 years old.
Correct.
So you had quite a big chunk of life experience before you started skating. And I think I saw in this interview you gave a while back that you grew up in the Alps where you were skiing and snowboarding a lot when you were growing up, and then eventually you started skating a bit later. But yeah, can you take us a little bit through, growing up and finding skateboarding eventually?
Yeah. As you said, I grew up in the Alps in a small town or actually village. We have like 5 farmhouses, but it happened to be that I moved to the UK for my A-levels. And so I did my GCSE actually also in the UK, which was, saved my life, I guess. And so I got really out of that environment I was in at home. I had quite a strong meningitis when I was 15, 16. And I was in hospital. Yeah, I was in hospital for a year and didn't really, I had a bit of a life crisis of what's going on? How do I want to live my life? I had to step back a year in school. It was difficult at home. And then, I had the possibility to move to the UK. And then it was much later, I think 5-6 years after I moved to the UK. It was 2004. I remember that because it was at the same time my foundation year in art started. I did a degree in art a foundation year in art in Freiburg University. Mm-hmm. And then later a bachelor in 3D design for sustainability. And there I was doing an internship with some on a carpet business. Unfortunately, they don't exist anymore, but they did very interesting wood bending architecture and furniture. And all of them skated.
Oh, wow.
And I was thinking that, so that was very nice they kind of introduced me to the skateboarding world.
Awesome.
And I would have never thought it would impact my life so much.
Yeah. And so I assume you had maybe tried skating in the past or at least seen it somewhere, like you must have seen people skate around in the streets or something. But what was kind of your vision of skateboarding before you actually were hooked?
I must admit, you don't really believe it probably now, but I didn't really know what skating is till I was 20. I didn't have any contact. I grew up in a mountain. We didn't have a TV at home. Back then, there was no smartphones. I was born in the 80s, so I knew that later on I learned that Tony Hawk was around. He was also in Germany, but I was very far away from that world. So I was in the mountains snowboarding and we built our own jumps and we got shouted at the lift because we were not appreciated. We were allowed to be there, but it was similar to later than in the streets that the snowboarding, the lifties were worrying that we ruined their tracks, and it was always a bit of a battle back then to get on the lift. But then I moved to the UK and there was no snow. And I think the first time I saw people skating was during the open fair at university. So I must have been 19, 20. Mm-hmm. Around that age, and I saw a clip of some guys skating and I was like, that's so crazy, it looks so cool, but I would never be able to do that. It was just totally out of my mind. I was like, that's not something for me, but I was intrigued with it. And then a year later I was on the board and it suddenly seemed so it wasn't easy for me. You know, some people step on the board and they're so talented. But I got hooked pretty much the first time I was on the board. I think what also hooked me was the difficult part of it. Finding the balance. Also the rush of joy when it's something worked that you tried a long time. So yeah, and I'm trying to think about how it was when I got into skating. You know, I was skating with the people from the workshop, and they also they introduced me to skating. But then I was also with this good friend of me, Harry, who we both studied together, and there was the 2 girls and lots of guys around. So that was the traditional sort of bubble. But she also did other things, and sometimes I would skate by myself and trying to learn tricks, and then because I felt a bit more comfortable sometimes because I needed so many tries. So I would just go out by myself on the street so nobody bothered me. Or also didn't have that pressure, I need to perform. Or because that gets me sometimes, the feeling I need to be cooler than I feel at the moment. You know what I mean.
So you said you started skating through those friends that initiated you to it. And what was kind of your first years of practicing skateboarding? Like, what did that look like? Did you usually go skate with friends? You mentioned you would skate alone sometimes. Would you go to skate parks? Would you just go to like an empty parking lot? How did you experience that?
Yeah, I think actually I look back to that pre our podcast because it was so far away from me, and I just wanted to see what it was. And there came a lot of appreciation for these early days. Because I think if there wouldn't have been like that, I'm not sure if I would still be skating. And I was studying in Falmouth. It's a university town, arty town, fishery town in England. Yeah. In Cornwall. And there I would skate with the boys, but I would also... And there we would do a lot of... There was this Castle Hill mob, we were called. And we did a lot of downhill skating on short wheels, so sort of hard, sort of Sergei Yuppie skate sort of slides and tech sliding. Okay. And there was this guy called Mark. I think he was riding quite long professionally. He showed me a lot of things. And I was actually, in that summer when I started skateboarding, I was also giving my first skateboard by this brand called Falltown Skateboards. Mm-hmm. Alex and some people who studied the same stuff than I did actually started their own little skateboard brand, and they don't exist anymore. They don't do boards, but they're still involved in the culture. And I feel like they're taking me sort of under their wing. You know, I was a foreigner back then. I was a girl, and I was very keen. And I think there was a combination of me going out by myself, going out with Harry to the car. There was a train station which had a couple of curbs in the parking lot, and there wasn't much business on the weekends. So we could skate there, and we did tried nose stalls and all these sort of early tricks. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and also cruising I also had a cruiser board, so I was always quite diverse. I was never just the street girl or just the park girl. Since I started skating, I had different boards. I guess it also comes from snowboarding. I had different setup of longboards for downhill and for cruising. I had a cruiser, I had a tech board, I had a park board and a bowl board, and later on a half-pipe board. So I tried everything. That's amazing. Yeah. So you were interested in all aspects or all the approaches of skateboarding, not just like the kind of mainstream street skating that you would see through Tony Hawk video games or that kind of thing. Like you were interested in a much wider versions of skating. Yeah. I also liked the different communities, you know. There was very different types of skaters, and I was enjoying, you know, I wouldn't say that I get bored, and I also don't think I did it deliberately. It just happened, you know. Some people asked me, do you want to come bowl skating? And we went on a trip, or do you want to go down? Also, actually, the boys, they were also they did downhill skating, they did street skating, they did tech sliding. And I also I went to the first bowl I skated with, was also with the Falltown crew. So, yeah, I think they introduced me quite well into the diversity of skateboarding. Yeah. I also tried slalom, actually. And now it's just most kids now just know street skating or park skating. It's a bit of a shame how it they were so diverse, and it got streamed down a lot. And so you just mentioned a little bit your studies, and you mentioned the Falmouth University. Is that how it's called? Falmouth? Yes, correct. Yeah, Falmouth. Yeah. And so eventually you completed a master's degree in peace development, security, and international conflict transformation in Innsbruck.
That's a little bit later. I think you completed that in 2013. And I was wondering if you could just take me a little bit through your studies, like how did you go from studying 3D design at Falmouth, and what led you to choose the path of peace and international conflict transformation? What made you interested in that field, kind of?
Yeah, it was actually skating. Because back then my partner showed me an article from, I think it was the Telegraph, one British newspaper. And there was an article where Skateistan was looking for funding to build a skate park in Kabul.
Yeah.
And they had this picture of some girls, and the headscarf was sort of fluttering in the wind, and they were on flip-flops, and the back buildings were all bombed out. And this picture really drew me in. And I was like, I'm a student, I have no money. And my partner then was like, Sophie, this is something for you. He said that more jokingly. I don't think he would never thought that I go there.
Yeah.
And at the end, he actually wasn't so keen on me going. But also my friends then, some of them really couldn't understand. They were also very concerned about my safety.
Yeah.
But I said, I don't have money, but I would like to come and volunteer. I wrote an email when I saw that article, and then Ollie wrote back to me saying, we don't have a hall, there's no room for you to come and volunteer, but maybe in 2 years' time. And I was like, yeah, this is, because in 2 years' time, they thought they're going to have the skate park running. And I was like, yeah, it was always in the back of my mind. I still really wanted it, but I didn't think they would ever call me back. Okay. And then I started, after my university, I stayed another year in Cornwall, and then I wanted to do an internship in a skateboard magazine in Berlin.
Oh, wow.
It was more it was also it was a fun sport. It was actually a terrible magazine, a terrible interview, but a terrible internship. But I noticed that I don't want to sit on a computer all the time. So I did that for half a year. I was editing this magazine. I had nice events I could go to take pictures and stuff, but the attitude of all this marketing, it wasn't for me. I just noticed, and also after working in the 3D design business, I wasn't brave enough to start my own company like the boys who I looked up to did. Mm-hmm. But I was also not comfortable of being told what to do and then designing. I had designed a rugby hat and stuff, and I had just different ways of going about it, and I had found it a bit difficult with my jobs I had. And then I think someone from Skateistan contacted me. Back then Rhiannon wasn't there. Okay. Shana, so that's her name, sorry, I had to dig deep there. Shana contacted me and she asked me, hey, we're looking for someone to volunteer, would you still be up for coming? And that was clear. I could feel it in my belly that that's the thing to do. And I said, yeah, sure. And we had that. It was my first, and think back in the time, still on Skype interview. And, because at the time we didn't do much interviews online, but because of course they were far away, we had an online interview, and I thought that was weird to talk to someone on the screen. I never did that before, but so just through that, and they were super sweet. They were very kind, and Max joined the call, and Ollie, and it felt good, So I went to Kabul after my bachelor. They picked me up. They told me in advance of what I should pack and what I should look out for and what I should not bring, and how, sort of cultural advice, and how to adapt well in the environment. And I flew out there during Karzai's re-election, and also just after Barack Obama back then was announced, or was given the Peace Prize, the Nobel Peace Prize.
Oh, yes.
And he got it given before he was a president, and unfortunately he sent shitloads more, so I think 10,000 soldiers back into Kabul, and we were all there thinking, why do you send soldiers? Why can't you send teachers? But I'm going off track now. But basically I went there as a teacher, and so I was their first international volunteer, because the other people were sort of very local, the Kabulis, or around the area, and there was very little foreigners, and there were 3 foreigners who started the NGO. And there I was fortunate enough to be there in the very early days, and had the honor.
Had it been, because I think it started in 2007, I believe, Skateistan, right? That's what I remember at least. So
correct.
You arrived there for the first time in 2009. So it had been launched 2 years before, maybe a year and a half or something. So it was still very, very new. And as you said, they were in the process of getting this skate park built and everything. So it was really the very beginning of the NGO.
Yeah, and they planned that very well. I basically arrived a week after the opening ceremony of the skate park in autumn 2029. And because before that they also did programs, and they just, they were on the street with their motorbikes, and they went to open public fountains and went skating with the kids, and noticed that they need a safe space for the girls. Mm-hmm. And my job was to teach the girls how to skate, and and also English. So like I was sort of we also went to the streets and informing students that this is an offer they can join. So we did the program on how to start, like sort of the first classroom program. It was a very exciting time.
I'm sure,
I learned a lot, yeah. And then, because the question was, how take to their journey. So I was there at Skateistan for several months. It was half a year and a bit on the first sort of stop. Like I didn't go back to Europe for half a year. And then I came back to Europe, and I was... on the day when I had a leaving party, mm-hmm. and I invited some couple of people, and one person brought a girl from Innsbruck who actually studied the peace studies program. We got talking because she was also speaking German, and she told me that there's a master in peace studies in Innsbruck on the day I left Kabul.
Oh, wow.
And that was just sort of the next step. I was like, yeah, this is interesting me. And then I was like, oh, but I didn't study politics. I'm coming from the design field. Is that possible? I emailed them saying, hey, I heard you have this program. Can I join? And I told them that I just came from Kabul. And they were like, yeah, sounded interesting. So they took me on. And then I did actually my second time when I went to Kabul. I went there 3 times total. I actually studied at the same time. So I was it the third time? Yeah. But I was a period where I was a student in Innsbruck.
Okay.
And at the same time working for Skateistan. And that was a bit of a overload of input. There was a lot of, like it was close to burnout then, because we had a long days at Skateistan, and then also studying for the master at the same time was a bit too much. But so I survived somehow, but I'm glad that was over. Yeah. Because the Innsbruck Peace Studies is very practical based. So they encourage you to go to different countries to learn about different cultures. So you have half a month there, half a month there. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And so what was your... got off track now.
No, it's perfect.
Where shall we continue?
No, that's great. I think the initial question was kind of what made you want to study peace and international conflict transformation and everything in Innsbruck, but you did answer that. And I want to talk a little bit more about your time in Afghanistan, and especially how those experiences led you to do this book, The Art of Living Sideways. You published that a few years later, I believe, in 2015. I don't know if you were already thinking of the book while you were doing those periods of time in Afghanistan, or if that project came to mind a bit later after the experiences. But yeah, just to focus a little bit on those experiences in Afghanistan. So you were there 6 months and then 2 other times. Was it every time for 6 months, or like several months, or were...
Yeah, it was more several months. I think 3-4 months.
Okay.
So the second 2 trips were shorter.
And was it your boyfriend, I think you said, who at the time showed you the picture from a magazine or something and told you, oh, look, they're skating in Afghanistan or something?
Yeah, because like I was always saying that skateboarding is sort of my therapist,
Yeah.
Coming from skateboarding back then, many people say that, and it's very cliches and it's embarrassing to say, but it's the way it was. For me, skating and peace made so much sense at the time. It was just a no-brainer. It was like, skating, gave me peace. And I had not studied peace before. And back then, the call was actually skateboarding for peace. That was the first slogan of Skateistan, as far as I remember.
Okay.
But it changed very quickly for skateboarding for education for several reasons.
Yeah.
Yeah. But this, and my second name is Friedel, which means peace in German.
Oh, okay.
Peace plus L. So when I was a teenager, when we argued, he would shout at me and say, I'm not angry, and our family is called peace. We can't have arguments here. Shut up. So there was always something that, So it was this contradiction from my dad I had. And, I was like, what does peace actually mean? But for me, skating was definitely peace. I felt at peace with the world, with all my worries sort of.
It spoke to you.
Not thinking about them for a while. Yeah. And so that's why I went to Kabul. Yeah. But at the time, it actually, shortly before I left the UK, I also, it's sort of blurring a bit, but I was not together with my partner back then before I went to Kabul.
Okay.
It separated before for other reasons. So, yeah.
And so, yeah, can you just tell me a little bit about what you remember of your first few days maybe in Afghanistan? Because I assume, I mean, today in 2025, there's a whole different situation over there, unfortunately. But even at the time, it was quite, I assume, a very dangerous place to go and hazardous, like a difficult. So even as exciting and challenging as it must have felt, were you a little scared prior to going? And once you arrived, did your fears kind of dissipate quickly? Like, what do you remember of your just arriving and kind of acclimating to this whole new environment, which was so different from what you were used to in Europe?
Yeah, interesting enough, I wasn't fearful. I don't think I would have gone if I had fear. But what happened, like the first time I actually started to I had a brief moment of fear when I flew there, because, before I went there, I went to my doctor to get the jabs for malaria and whatnot. Sure. And he actually called me the day before my flight was and saying, listen, Sophie, he was also serving for the German army, and he was a helicopter pilot, and he just returned from a trip from Kabul. So he was doing volunteer work for the Red Cross there, and he was saying, listen, Sophie, I just come back from Kabul. I really advise you not to go. He had the situation where there was shooting, and there was a woman wounded, and the man just left her bleeding to death and disappeared. And he was saying, this is how they treat women there. You really shouldn't go. And that was the first time I actually felt a bit worried. Mm-hmm. But then I also, the people from Skateistan, they were so calm. They were so...
reassuring, or
I didn't even tell them till I arrived, because it just felt so safe talking to them. It felt so like fitting that this is my path. And then I got to the airport, and I was in Frankfurt waiting for my flight, and then there was the news that Karzai is being re-elected. I was just after that it's sure now, and there was some bombing. I was like, is it really the right idea that I'm going? And I was like, now I'm on the airport, I'm definitely going now, let's see. Yeah. And I was definitely nervous when I arrived at the airport, and there were a lot of guys trying to offering the help, wanting to pull my trolley and and I was advised to not accept that help, to carry my own bag out of the gate. Mm-hmm. And then they will pick me up at the gate. And that's what I did. So I kind of felt like I had a plan. I think if I wouldn't have known, it was really like when you get to Costa Rica, there are also lots of taxi drivers wanting to sell you a ride. So if I would have been very overwhelmed if they wouldn't have told me. But I was quite calm. It was early in the morning. I remember I came from Frankfurt, and it was so beautiful to fly over the mountains. It was early sunrise, and it was all golden, and you could see vast fields of nothingness. Like, there was, of course, a lot of nature, but no buildings. And back then, the airfield was still it wasn't concrete. It was just pressed down mud, very hard mud, most of it. So it was very rustic or very basic. Yeah. And very down to earth, very like, let's go. That's how we do it. There wasn't much rush. There was a lot of chill. There was a lot of, one step after the other when I arrived. And then I remember that they picked me up, and we had a good coffee at the Skateistan HQ. And then we actually drove directly to the skate park. And at the skate park, there was a delegation waiting. Oh, yes. And we were supposed to show them the skate park. Yeah. So, and I was so, adrenaline kicking in the first time in Kabul. And that's my first time at the Skateistan park, which I wanted to go for 2 years. Then all these people, it was crazy. And then I really had a very bad crash, not seeing the staircase. But I think that was all very positive. But I very fastly learned to adapt, to not look into people's eye, like men's eye, not touch people, not touch men in public. And for me, I was, I didn't think twice. It just happened. I did that naturally. Later on, I was in contact with people who really had difficulties to do that. But I felt like I can adapt to that environment well. And but this took me a long time to get out of it. I must admit, it was very difficult for me to be able to look guys in the eyes again after 6 months in Kabul. Yeah, I'm sure. And that really changed something in my awareness of myself.
And what about the first classes with children? Do you remember, I don't know if you had already taught skateboarding before going to Afghanistan. Had you ever taught skateboarding just with children or even with friends? Or was that your first time kind of teaching skateboarding to young children?
I was teaching skateboarding a bit to like a youth center in Falmouth, and also on a summer camp for mountain boarding. They invited me to, I also used to mountain board for a while. They invited me to teach at a camp there, so I had some experience. But yeah, I think it was pretty much the first experience teaching skateboarding to small children.
And how was that? Like, how did you, because I mean, it must have been interesting just because of the cultural and language barrier, I assume. And also these people have don't really know what skateboarding is, or maybe the people the kids you were teaching had already been skating for a little bit, I don't know, but in Afghanistan, skateboarding was just very foreign. It was just something they had probably never seen or seen very little of. So how was kind of those first interactions with children and afterwards, like, because I read, I think in the book that you would go sometimes on sessions outside of the skate park and just on the streets and stuff. And how was kind of skateboarding perceived in Afghanistan when you were out on sessions with Oliver and some other people from Skateistan?
Yeah, we were. I had the experience that we were always very welcomed. And when I arrived, the kids sort of seen skateboards before. You know, the kids I was teaching. They were very excited about it, but they were excited about everything. They were really excited about learning. They were like swamps, you know. They wanted to suck up all the knowledge, like, tell me more. It doesn't matter if it was art or skating or English. They were super excited. They were very adorable and loving, and we actually learned very fast because we were also, you know, we had big hearts and we wanted to, I think, maybe I'm being very idealistic if we wanted to change the world, but there was definitely a touch to that. Actually, I didn't mention earlier, but I think one big drive why I wanted to go to Kabul was also next to the skating and the bringing peace idea was also because when I was having meningitis, I was in the hospital and there was the Oktoberfest. I was living in Munich when I grew up close to Munich. And they did an evacuation training in case the Oktoberfest gets bombed. And I was very afraid back then. And I saw the 9/11 basically in intensive care on TV. And then they were a bit worried that Al Qaeda comes to Munich, and they told us what to do when they evacuate us, and they showed me the space where they want to push me in case they have to evacuate me, which was a basement cellar thing. And I was, you know, you just go with it. I wasn't particularly very afraid of that situation, but years later, when the opportunity with Kabul came, I realized there's actually still this, I want to make the world a better place idea, and I don't want people to be afraid that the Al Qaeda comes, you know. So there was also this very altruistic drive of making the world a better place and teaching the people in Kabul about peace. Yeah, which is great. At the time, I respect my thinking now, but I was also a bit embarrassed about that when I arrived, because the people I interacted with were much more peaceful, much more human, much more respectful in the conversation than I was used to from Germany, to be honest. I think that was a big, interesting observation that, they were very kind in the sort of interaction with sharing food and sharing everything, and there was a lot of hospitality. And here, you know, foreigner people get treated very badly. I'm sometimes embarrassed in how we treat foreigners in Germany and other European countries, I think. Yeah,
in France as well, definitely. And so can you tell me a little bit about how those experiences in Afghanistan eventually led you to writing this book, The Art of Living Sideways? How did the idea kind of start? Did it start in Afghanistan? Did it start afterwards? And then how long did it take you to work on the book and get it done? And I think it came out in 2015, I believe, around there. And I read somewhere that it actually began as your master thesis, right? For the UNESCO program in Innsbruck.
Correct.
So can you tell me a little bit about kind of the junction between your time in Afghanistan and that book project?
Yeah, because with every master you have to write a master's thesis, right? And I think it was clear from the beginning that I wanted to write about skateboarding and the idea of skateboarding for peace. I think I knew that already. Actually, I had to write a form of what do you call it? When you want to start a master, I had to write a form of intent. I had to tell the university why I want to study peace, security, development, and international conflict transformation. And I remember I stated that I want to become a peace builder and want to help people in conflict to solve conflicts and transform conflicts. And I wanted to go to the UN and work there. And that was sort of my mission when I started. And then while continuing with Skateistan and then reflecting on the work the UN does, and I was very interested in Krishnamurti and other philosophers, on like Erich Fromm, and who was an Auschwitz survivor. And it's like, I was just always fascinated on how do we live well together as humans, and how can conflict be solved, transformed? Why do we live in, I don't have really answers still, because I'm looking at politics now, I'm like, why didn't we learn from their history, you know?
Yeah.
I'm laughing now because this is the only way I can cope about it, to be honest, but it's shocking to me. We have all this knowledge, and it's just history repeating itself. Yeah, but I don't want to go down that rabbit hole.
Yeah. For another podcast. But yeah. So yeah, you were telling me about you wanting to get into that program, and how that eventually led you to working on the book.
Yes, because through that program, I was obviously very much, I was given a critical lens to look at development work. Because before we had like all these big dreams, and I think it was amazing. Skateistan in the beginning, it had such a high potential, or still has, but now there's many more projects similar to Skateistan. But back then there was what we call Vorreiter in German. It's like like some visionary in how to do better developmental aid, or like in educating and more respectful way of dealing with differences. So I was giving this critical lens, and I think my part of my studies was to reflect on my work, like my practical work. I wanted to understand what did go well, what went not so well, where can I improve my work, sort of what you do, if you want to improve, you kind of do a look back on, and take stance on what you did. And that was sort of the idea of, I guess I knew that there was a bit of a hope that my work gets published, because I knew that there was this opportunity for the best thesis got selected by our professors to be published. They had this deal with a publishing company, and they always picked one every year. So I knew if I hand in a thesis, I'm having the chance to be one of the people picked. So I wanted that. When doing my research, I was actually very thorough with my research. I had the honor to have an Erasmus scholarship for founders. And I actually used that partly to reflect on my work, because I knew I wanted to continue working in the sports and development field. Back then we called it like that. Now it sounds like cheesy and horrible. I don't want to, I'm not working it. But, so back then that was how I got my money from Erasmus to work on that field. And I was in Sweden for a while with Rick Holland, from Florida. And that was a cultural crash in my mind. It was such a brain fuck. I came from Costa Rica, which was after Kabul. I was working at the University for Peace for a semester in Costa Rica. And then I started writing my master's thesis.
Okay.
So I had first Kabul, then I had a week of change. I got a friend who got married in Spain, and then I went to Costa Rica for half a year. And then after Costa Rica, I basically had a week at home to get my change, to repack my bags, and I went to Florida, and there was snow there, and like ice. People had spikes on their cars, and it was dark at like only 3 hours light during the day.
Oh my God.
March, I think.
Wow.
And I felt like, I think I said that in my book, I felt like I lost my soul, I didn't know where, I felt like my soul was in the plane somewhere. It was such a cultural mix up. I really I didn't know where, and I had to write my master's thesis while doing this Erasmus scholarship, also learn from Rick and the company there, So that was a bit tough. It was very tough, actually. But somehow also very, very cool, because I had so much time to deep dig into myself. It was, my teacher always said, don't do a soul striptease, but be honest with yourself, share what's important to share. So it's a very personal work of, on my journey on what I learned.
So, from my understanding, your original research question, I think I read that either in the book or somewhere else, but your original research question at the beginning of the project was, how can the power of skateboarding be harnessed as an elicitive tool for conflict transformation? So I guess that was probably the way you started this. And I was wondering, how did that evolve throughout the process? Because like you said, you were in very different environments, you moved around a lot, and you were going through a lot. So how did that question evolve throughout the whole writing process?
Yeah, wow, it's very nice that you digged out my research question. I wouldn't have been able to remember that. It was, where do I start that? It turned, first thing when I heard my question, I was thinking, just now, I was thinking, wow, that's very, very direct and very precise in being very like a mechanic, researching on how the world functions. And I think sort of very modern mindset on how we operate. And that was before I started my training to become a therapist. So now as a therapist looking at that question, I find that very, prescriptive in a way. Mm-hmm. So that's interesting change that happened. I can just share that I became aware of from listening to you telling me my question again. And I think it's a big learning curve. And I'm still I'm not sure if I ever found a good answer, on how you can harness the power of skateboarding. Because I think one power of skateboarding is that it doesn't want to get harnessed. Mm-hmm, yeah. It's this magic somehow that it's free. It's a free energy. And we can pretend to be gold diggers and have our tools and machines. But I think the nice and the beauty of skateboarding is that you can do whatever you want to do with it. So it's very shapeable. Mm-hmm. And this actually yesterday I watched The Matrix again. Okay, yeah. And that was actually sort of the essence of The Matrix is, right? What you believe, you act like on how you believe the world works. And Nemo not believing he is the one, and then he really needs to experience, wow, I do have superpower, and he's not believing he's the one, and then the power came when he noticed he has it, it's so difficult to describe the process, but I think with the skating, it's similar. If I believe that I can harness the power of skating, I can maybe subtract a little bit. And I would say this is the playfulness in environments where it's very serious. With that, skateboarding opened doors for us. I would have never imagined, you come with this toy as an adult woman or also man. And then, I was at embassies and I was at board meetings. Back then, skating was sort of, you're crazy weirdos. Also in the therapy field. Some people really can't understand, and there's also very supportive people, luckily, but it's not a traditional way of being as well. Now it becomes more and more traditional and more accepted, but I think there are certain keys. But then the same thing is, if we use that power to harness, or if you harness the power, I feel like the young people I'm working with, if I'm too restrictive, they don't want it. All the social work with skateboarding, there is this pivot point where skateboarding can potentially become very uncool because it's not used as a free thing. It's used to teach something or used to bring on life lessons. I'm thinking about youth centers, for example, or also me in the therapy. But it's a nice thing with skating. You can do whatever you want with real skating. You can't define real skating. You can. There's so much freedom and so much creativity. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I think that's the big lesson I learned. I don't think it's possible to catch skateboarding as a whole. It's too diverse. Yeah. It's too wild. It's too wonderful in a way that it's you can distill parts of it. But I think I tried with my research question back then. I tried to understand skateboarding. I think that's what the point was. Yeah. And I think I understand parts of it, but it's my perspective on a big culture that is so diverse all over the world, the different tribes of skaters. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I want to go to something a bit more current because we were talking about all this Afghanistan that was a bit over a decade ago for you now. And the book also came out 10 years ago. And I was wondering if you could tell me a little bit about how you transitioned from working on all that and eventually getting interested in therapy, because I read that you became a Gestalt therapist in 2022, so that's pretty recent. But I think you were already doing stuff around that beforehand. So could you tell me a little bit about the transition from, kind of your piecework with skateboarding to going into how skateboarding can be used as a therapeutical tool, I guess? Yeah, that's So I think after my studies, as shared earlier, I wanted to go to the UN, and then I finished my master's, and then I was very happy that I got selected to publish my thesis, or The Art of Living Sideways. That was a project where after I finished my master, I spent half a year researching and making a book out of my thesis while working in Vienna. And I felt like I wanted to get a job somehow involved with peace or conflict transformation. And it was very difficult for me because I decided after my last time in Kabul that it's too dangerous for me to be in Kabul. There was some moments where I realized it's over now. And I was like, okay, damn, what do I do? I'm not really, there was a lot of job openings in sort of Central and South Africa, but I felt like I never really felt drawn to that part of the world.
Okay.
But in my teaching, like one of my teachers said, or there's also the saying, I think it comes from Native Americans, peacemaker, before you go out in the world, take care of your family first, or like in your own heart.
Okay.
It's not the original way, but the message I got from it, first to clean in front of my own porch.
Yeah, sure.
That was sort of the origin why I became a therapist, because I came from a bit of I don't know if it's interesting, it's probably not really interesting for anyone, but I had a period at home where I was very lost, and I think because of at home, my family name was Peace, but we had so much conflicts, so much things that wasn't spoken about, so much pain and suffering because the language was missing on how to communicate the pain. There was several heartbreaks, and I was like, how can I be if I'm a peacemaker and I have so much pain at home, so let's first clean at home. Yeah. So I decided not to go out in the world again and stay at home to really clean it in front of my own porch, so to say. And I think I felt like I'm not sick enough to go in therapy, but I was like, okay, if I go the training to become a therapist, you also do a lot of therapy yourself, right? Because you have to train with your colleagues, and you do triads, we call it, where one is the therapist and the other is the client, and you can work on your topics. So I guess it was a nice way for me to clean in front of my own porch, because I could address the suffering I felt inside, and the pain, and the non-peaceful states, to actually feel peace in my own heart,
Yeah.
And on that journey, I did a program from a guy called Claudio Naranjo. He developed in the 70s and 80s, or he was one of the first person who brought meditation to therapy. He is originally was from Chile and was working in Berkeley a lot, and he started a program, or developed a program, where people would meet in a seminar center for 10 days and work on their character structures, or to help to understand their character structures. And I think that was sort of my way of into therapy, and I started that on the last part of my peace studies master.
Okay.
And sort of I feel like in the end of my book, I had the idea of using it as a therapy, but I didn't have the qualification. I was totally lacking any idea of how to use it therapeutically. But there was the idea that it could be used in a psychotherapy setting. But there was also so much shame. I don't know where the shame comes from. Now I hear people talk about using skateboard as therapy, like it would be the most logical thing. But back then I was like, I had that idea, I think, since I was first day arrived in Kabul. I always thought that.
Already? Okay.
Yeah. And then I was like, okay, if that's really still my thing, I'm going to become a therapist. And after my peace studies master, pretty soon after I enrolled in a program, because in Austria, my master is, with that master, I'm entitled to become a therapist in Austria. Also, like the full lot. It's because there's also a lot of psychology in it. And so that you do this program for 2 years where you learn about all the different types of therapy school. And then you choose one of these schools and become a therapist. So I did these 2 years in Austria, and I was working at the Sigmund Freud University hospital ambulant. So we took inpatients sort of for first screenings, and I did testings there, and I really liked it. It was a lot of fun. So I was like, yeah, that's the one to do. But I didn't get a job in Vienna.
Okay.
It didn't work out for me. I was there for 2 years, right? Not really finding anything that was like that suited me. So I accepted a job in Freiburg in Germany.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
I got that through this program from Claudio Naranjo, and the lady who was managing that program, she was running an institute here in Freiburg. And then in 2006, I moved to Freiburg to
2016?
To have a job there.
Did you mean 2016?
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah,
2016.
okay.
Thanks for pointing that out.
No worries.
Yeah.
Okay, so that was pretty quick after you completed the book. Then it was like the following year, more or less, that you settled down in Freiburg and started studying psychology, I guess.
Yeah, I actually finished my book 2014. It just took a while to get published.
Okay.
And it got published in January 2015. And I never studied psychology, and that's a bit of a tricky thing because in Germany to become a licensed therapist, you need to study 5 years of psychology.
Okay.
And then you do the 5 years training or 6 years training to become a therapist. And for me, it was clear I don't want to study another 5 years in bachelor, master. And I just finished my master. I was glad to have published the book. And I was like, how can I be useful to the world? That was my big question.
Yeah.
I don't want to go back to a conflict region. I cleaning in front of my own porch. And I felt like my family is not the only family struggling with not having words for dramas that happened, so I was like, okay, how can I help people here? What can I do with my skill? I mean, I always, because of my meningitis and I had a near-death experience when I was 15,
Mm-hmm.
I always had the feeling there needs to be more to life than just running a 9-to-5 job. I was never in a 9-to-5 job.
Yeah.
Sometimes I felt like I need to in order to be normal, but I've always had this drive like to do something
with purpose. Yeah. And so, what made you choose? What attracted you to Gestalt therapy? I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about that specifically, because I didn't know that term until I just started researching for this interview, and so I looked it up on the internet. But I'd love to hear what you think it is, or how would you kind of describe it to me or to the listeners? Like, what is Gestalt therapy? How does it differentiate from other forms of therapy, maybe? And what attracted you to that one specifically?
Yeah, that's an interesting journey because I first heard about Gestalt during my master's in Innsbruck, and our professor sort of told about the founders of Gestalt, who were originally actually German. They had Jewish backgrounds and they had to flee in the Second World War because of the situation there. And they went to South Africa and then later to the US. And in the US, they started with a couple of other people this new school of Gestalt therapy, and they were both trained in the school of Sigmund Freud, so the founders, Fritz and Laura Perls. So they come from that background, and the sort of Gestalt is the first therapy that splits a bit from the traditional psychoanalysis.
Okay.
And I think that was one thing that drew my interest, that rebellious energy of, hey, they learn so much and they really appreciate the old wisdom and knowledge on how our mind works and how therapy works, but they also dare to speak up and say, hey, but I think something else is also important, because Sigmund Freud was very much talking about the sex drive, and Fritz Perls sort of introduced the idea of the hunger drive, that there's more than just a sex drive in humans, and Sigmund Freud, and he had a big argument about that. And basically, to cut the story short, I was fascinated by this institute, the Esalen Institute in the US. So I heard, during my master, I heard about this institute where Fritz Perls was studying. And then this Claudio Naranjo guy I met through a friend, and he was a student of Fritz Perls, and he was sort of teaching us, or he was living Gestalt, and I was in his seminars, and I really was mind blown on how creative Gestalt therapy is. It's not just a talking cure. It's I use drama, and I use drama in the sense of going into scenarios, speaking out things, and trying to address things in other possible ways. So to give freedom of choice. And I feel like the main sort of back then the founder of Gestalt was always talking in big sentence but he was sort of saying interesting, bold statements that I liked, that I got drawn as yeah, that makes sense.
Okay.
And, or drop your mind, come to your senses, there's sort of this idea, when you do a skateboard trick and you think too much, it's important to think about it and knowing what you do, but it's also important to, at one point, let go and just be in your body, try.
Yeah.
And I like that idea of, without thinking too much, not so cognitive based, more, not even emotionally based, because I think what Gestalt for me is, it's combining the cognitive, the emotional, and the sort of the gut feeling you have, sort of out of the belly.
Yep.
And I'm trying to combine these three felt senses. I think that's sort of my medicine, maybe, that I have for people to become more aware, to be able to. Gestalt means sort of shape, form, design.
Okay.
I'm not in this design movement thing, but even though I studied design, but I mean, I'm like, how can you, with your felt senses, create a life that you find worth living? I think that's sort of what I'm trying to help my clients with. And I felt that really skateboarding has a lot of that as well. Now it changed a bit, but when I started skating, there was this big rebellious thing. Skateboarders are a bit different than other people. No, it's totally changed now. Skateboarding is very mainstream in certain parts, but this sort of, you dress differently. You're a bit of the outcast and the weirdo. Oh yeah, she's the skater girl. So I felt like some people don't take me serious. Also here, my old boss, I felt like she never really understood the power of the therapeutic part of skateboarding. So yeah.
I wanted to ask you about this. You did this chapter in the Skate World's New Pedagogies in Skateboarding, the book that was released last year, co-edited by Sandra Holzgens and Adelina Ong. And you contributed a chapter on Gestalt therapy, which we were talking about. And I was wondering, I just read that earlier today, and I found it fascinating. And I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about contributing for that project specifically. And if you can tell us a little bit, I mean, the listeners can probably go buy the book or get it wherever they want to get it. But I found the two case studies that you developed in there very interesting, in how you use skateboarding as a tool to help with these two people you were accompanying, guiding. I'm not sure what the correct word would be for that kind of interaction. But yeah, can you tell me a little bit about how you got involved in the book, basically, and then how you wrote this chapter?
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. I was very happy that I think Sander back then asked me if I wanted to join. He's thinking of making this shared book, and he asked very interesting people to contribute. And I actually had, I think I had a lot of time for my casework, because I picked two cases that I wrote for my degree to become a Gestalt therapist. In order to get my certificate, I had to write therapy case studies.
Yeah.
And I wrote about therapeutic skateboarding, that was my question. How can we integrate skateboarding in therapy, and what works, what doesn't work, what are limitations, what are opportunities? And so I finished that, and then shortly after, Sander asked me if I would be joining that book project, and then I translated my case studies into English, and I think that's basically it. I contributed, and there was also Sander and Angelina gave a lot of good comments, and rephrased it a bit, but I didn't do that much changes actually, so it was again a bit of a part of my degree, which got published. But I guess I published it because I wanted to share the potential of skateboarding, and I also wanted to keep on thinking of maybe doing a PhD one day, but I think I'm too involved in the topic. I think it will be very difficult, impossible for me to look subjective on, with a distance, in order to really do science work and to give measurable paper out. I'm not sure if skateboarding can ever be measured. I think that will be impossible to quantify in a valid study, but it's interest to do that somehow.
Mm-hmm. And so the case studies that you develop in the book, I assume, are things that you've lived. And I wanted you to tell me a little bit about drop-in, write-out. How did you start, basically working with skateboarding as a therapeutical tool? And how did that eventually lead you to starting drop-in, write-out?
I mentioned this job I came to Freiburg to. It was always 50%. I knew that it will be only 50%. And I was like, what else do I do? So I worked in different skate shops for a while. Then it's really annoying. I had to pay more tax because I had two jobs, So I was like, what can I do? And then again, this question, I always ask myself this question, how can I be useful to society? I think that's very helpful. Mm-hmm. And then sort of the answer that came was to start a skateboard school.
Yeah.
there was no skateboard school in Freiburg. I had fun teaching. I think my boyfriend asked me, what would you say if he asked you what's your favorite trick is? And then I was going to say my favorite trick is teaching skateboarding. Because I think this is what I at the moment like most, you know. I really have joy seeing kids and also adults actually get their mind blown away by doing something they always thought I can't do.
Yeah.
And then,
for sure.
Yeah, so I started the skateboard school Rollbrett workshop in 2017. And out of that grew as a side project in 2018, the Drop In Right Out project.
Mm-hmm.
And in 2018, I was allowed to work with clients. So I was in training to become a therapist. I got a scholarship for social entrepreneurship. I was selected here in Freiburg. So I had financial support to work with clients and to set up what potentially could be therapeutic skateboarding. So that was how I got the money to start my project.
Okay.
And of course, back then I knew how to do therapy and I had the supervision from my trainers. And then the newspaper got interested and they published about that I got a scholarship and that I was, that I'm a skater and I'm using skateboarding in therapy and maybe there's people interested to be, clients.
Mm-hmm,
And so it was... Actually, the paper didn't mention that I'm looking for clients, but I was. And the paper just sort of thought that was an interesting project. And then parents called me up and saying, hey, like the day after, I heard you do this. Can I send my kid? And I was like, oh, fuck. I was like totally not ready. I was super like thrown in the hot soup pot, as you would say in German.
Yeah.
But I was prepared in a way that I had guidelines. I had skateboards, you know. We have a very nice new skate park here now since 2020. And I really like it. It's very nice environment, and so I had my first clients, and there was a lot of trial and error, of course,
of course,
but also a lot of potential, and I'm very grateful for all the brave souls that started skateboard therapy with me to dare to enter the process. But I think you need creativity to skate and you need creativity to be a good therapist. It's like this making stuff out of, you know, knowing your borders and knowing your capacities and then working with that like a good artist or like somebody, a potterer or something.
Sure.
Or sculpture, you know, you work what you have in front of you, like a stone. Or so I work with the topics the clients bring and with the skateboard. And sometimes I think the two examples I have in the book, we use skateboarding more like as a train and we sit on the bum. And I think one big part of what I use the ramp, like it works very well in Gestalt therapy. We have a thing called chair work, where you're setting either a person you have a conflict with or internal parts of yourself, you know, when you have a paradox and one side won't start and the other side won't start, or sometimes also to look at your inner child. I set aspects of my clients into a chair in the therapy room, and in the skateboard, I let my clients to choose ramps or objects in nature, because sometimes we don't skate in skate parks. Sometimes we look for spots a bit more far away. Okay. And I also use trees sometimes in part of my therapy, but I use them as a substitute for something. So in the book, there's this one example where I asked my client to choose a ramp for her to be able to get in contact with his mother, or his father, and then we sit on the ramp, and there's a certain way of working or like addressing a topic that helps client to find something out about themselves that they didn't know before. And so I do that. And for example, that one client sat on the example I share in the book. The client chooses the volcano as a representative of his mother, who has a lot of fits. And then he understands his mother better by getting in contact with that, and he can clear some, like a conflict he has. It sounds very abstract. I think people need to read the chapter if they want to understand.
For sure. No, I understand because I just read it, and I invite whoever's listening to this to definitely check it out because it's very interesting. The whole book is interesting, but especially that chapter I resonated very deeply with me. The other case study that you just mentioned, this little girl who was, it was interesting, it was funny, not funny, I'm not making fun of her, but you were telling about how she was obsessed basically with train schedules, and she was having a hard time connecting with her mother, who was maybe upset about her daughter, being so obsessed with train schedules and not kind of having a more normal, so to speak, behavior and, interacting with other children or whatever. You kind of had her sit on the skateboard and you were using the skateboards as a train kind of. And I was wondering, how did you come up with that idea? Did it just come to you spontaneously? And do you usually, whenever you're confronted with, I was going to say patient, but you do say clients, and I think it's an interesting way of seeing it also. They're clients, they're not patients. Is it usually like you just come up with a method on the spot, or do you, have maybe a first discussion with whoever you're going to accompany and just discuss with them what they're going through, and then eventually that some ideas will come to mind of things you can do with them with the skateboard, and you'll choose a setting, either a skate park or going to a skate spot or whatever? Like, how do you usually approach a client that you want to accompany therapeutically?
Yeah, I'm very happy to share more on that, but I like to pick up on this client-patient thing first, because I think that's also very particular in Gestalt therapy. Mm-hmm. And we do call them clients to keep the agency, because I want, if I'm calling them patient, I'm sort of the therapist in white, and I know better for someone. And I like that on Gestalt, that I keep I'm assisting people, and I help them to understand themselves, the family dynamic they're in. Mm-hmm. And so with my clients, with the little girl, I of course had a first phone call with the mother, and that's with kids, it normally works through the parents. Sometimes a youth hostel worker, or specialized worker from the municipality, or sometimes also with other therapists. I also work with the hospital, with the daycare, and there I have contact with the station therapist, and we talk about certain issues, or how to run a program, how to structure a program according to the needs of the clients. And with adults, I actually work a lot with adults at the moment. Also the skateboard therapy is often men and women, students, but also older people around 50-ish is sort of the limit, where people are sort of 35. It's 53, sorry. I'm 53, sort of the oldest client I had last year. Yep. And there are often people who want to learn how to skateboard. So the kids who come, actually I have two types of clients. I have sort of skaters who skate quite well, who skate professionally, who know how to skate. And funny enough, with them, sometimes I go to the skate parks, but often I have in my sort of regular clinic, I have quite a few skaters. Mm-hmm. And I think it helps them, or I have the impression, and we also spoke about it helps them that I'm also a skater. I feel they understand I understand a certain part of them. Mm. And then, but then if I work with the boards, I'm not I can't skate as well as I used to anymore. I'm also feeling I'm getting older, and it suits me quite well that a lot of my clients are beginner skateboarders. Mm-hmm. With the people who can skate very well. Sometimes people skate also better than me. That is more like a joint session. We do, we have an initial phone call, discuss sort of the main topic. I need to assess before we meet if my service suits them. So there's a certain question I have to ask to see if it fits in my framework that I can offer. And then when that is all clear, we meet in the skate park. Mm-hmm. With adults, we normally meet sort of 90 minutes, because then we have a half an hour to skate and an hour for a therapy session. Right. And with the kids, depending on the age, I also have 4-year-olds I work with. So with them, I do sometimes only half an hour, 45 minutes, because of their attention span, and it fits to their age. And then with sort of teenagers, I do an hour. And so there's different types of framing, time frame I have. And the usual thing is that I accompany people from Easter till Halloween. That's sort of my season. So I'm a season therapist. It's maybe very unusual, and some sort of more traditional people would find that unfitting, but the clients that come to me, for them it works very well. And I also have the offer to work through the winter, but then in case the weather is, because we don't have a skate hole where I live, so we all do outside work. Yeah. So I sometimes move the skate if we go walking when it rains, or we go under a bridge, or sometimes I had sessions in the winter where we have the flask and warm stuff. But in general, like this happens if I feel like it's important, or there's always a mutual agreement, of course, but also if the clients want support through the winter, which of course is also a time where it's very helpful to get support, we find ways of them being safely embedded. But with the kids, it works very well to sort of do this one season thing. I mean, if depending, like at least the kids who come to me. therapy.
Okay.
And then, sometimes the topic is so present that we start talking straight away and we work Gestalt way and then we go skating. Sometimes we first go skating. Usually we first go skating and then we have the therapy aspect. We don't do it together.
Okay.
I mean, we do it in one session, but we don't. Of course, we talk a bit when skating, but it's also good to focus when skating.
I find it fascinating because I've been seeing a therapist, I guess. I'm not sure if that's the right way to say it, but I've been in therapy for a few years now. I do like Zoom calls like we're doing now with my therapist, and we're just talking. And I'm not at all used to the type of therapy that you're doing, which seems very it's super interesting, the way you're mixing movement and being outside and doing something both fun, but also, you mentioned like also the chair work and everything and kind of the projection. And I was wondering if you had drawn inspiration from other people that had been doing maybe similar kind of initiatives around you, or was, to your understanding, were you maybe one of the first people to combine kind of skateboarding and therapy that in this way, or?
Yeah, well, I'm very inspired by other therapists, of course. And I feel like I'm also intrigued in, similar to interest types of skating, I'm also intrigued on the effect of different types of therapy. Mm-hmm. And I feel like there's a lot of richness one can get out of a talking cue, or like there's a lot of cognitive understanding, and it helps you to become more clear about yourself, I guess. But I also felt I was always the body missing. Mm-hmm. And I would say I'm quite cognitive in a way, but I'm also dyslexic, and I find it sometimes difficult to articulate myself in language so well. So for me, it was also quite this hands-on stuff. It's this intuitive sensing the body, the felt senses. There's so much knowledge also in the felt sense, and your nervous system and regulating the nervous system. Mm-hmm. So I was very drawn to that. And when I first started my program, I was actually quite shy and embarrassed about it because, I was in this environment with a lot of smoking, drinking, lots of loud music, and quite tough, sort of masculine skate environment. And then I'm coming there and, hey, it's peace and love and
let's sit down and do therapy.
And I was like, how do I explain these guys what I mean? I was very blocked in my language for a while.
It's a little scary, I'm sure. Yeah.
And then I came to Freiburg, and I actually remember I came with, I think I had a 6-pack with me even on one of our sessions. Okay. And they were like, what, you drink? And I come to a new skatepark and I wanted to make friends, so I brought some beer, and they all didn't drink. It was quite interesting. That's very nice about, like, now, of course, there's people drinking in Freiburg. It's not that nobody drinks, but it was a bit more chilled than in Vienna. In Vienna was very tough. The bowl skating scene in Vienna is quite rough. Anyway, so I came from that environment in Vienna. There was also a lot of competition and being cool and showing off and needing to be someone, but still also feeling uncomfortable in my own body, and then wanting to, I also have these internal conflicts where I often try to be different than I was. I've had difficulties to look at my pain, and the skateboarding was a very nice distraction. And now becoming a therapist, I felt like I learned also how to look at that pain and had the capacities to hold the suffering. So my first inspiration were therapists, of course, especially sort of trauma-based therapy, somatic experience and Gestalt, but also then pretty soon after I started, I learned about Joel from Push to Heal, that's also very nice on what they do in Canada. Right? Yes. Yeah. So, and they have it's now very nice to see, because now there's also Titus who works with ages, he has a very different approach, and there's this other American dude, I can't remember his name now, his thing is called Skateboard Therapy as well on Instagram. Okay. And there's 4 people this is the 4 people I know working with therapy and skateboarding, and I'm surely there are other people somehow as well, but and there was this longboarder who was also a therapist who at first, I forgot his name. I never met him, but seems like he used longboarding in his therapy sessions. Okay. Yep. And then so I actually inspired by him. I had my first sessions talking and skating. So we went for a cruise, or we did a bit of skating and then talking, and that doesn't work for me at all. I really noticed quite fast. And then I also looked into studies because there's a lot of sports-based therapy out there. There's a lot of clinical studies also on the effect of sitting on a bike and talking, or first sitting on a bike and then talking, for example. And that I use that wisdom to shape my therapy session as well. That first, the skating is like an entryway of it connects so fast, building trust. People see that I can also fall, or that I'm just a human, it's not this white slate.
Exactly.
And there are different ways of doing therapy. There's also a meaning in not sharing much. Some therapists I know, they don't share much at all about themselves. It's very white. But I find, for me, that was never useful. I always felt a bit left in the open space. I need contact. I need people giving me feedback. I need also friction sometimes. And feeling that I'm talking to someone who's a real human and who is not just sitting there.
Yeah. Before we do the friends questions, I'd love to ask you, what do you feel is the most valuable lesson you learned from skateboarding?
Yeah, the first thing that comes to my mind is humbleness. Because, I mentioned earlier, I know these times that every time I want to show off and want to be cool, I've hurt myself. So it's really every time. So
ego check.
It's ego check, such an ego check. So, some people are I have a small kid. She's amazing under pressure. She drives when other people watch her. And her skating gets instantly better if she knows she's being filmed.
Oh, wow.
And I am the total opposite. If I know when I'm being filmed, I want to make it super sick now. I want to make it look good. And, then I'm not with the board anymore. Then I'm on the perception of what I think other people experience when they're watching me. So total mind fuck.
Yeah.
And I think to answer your question, what did skating teach me is that being in the body, being the skating works so much better if you don't think about what you're doing. When I had phases where I was skating a lot, so the body felt like an extension of my body. Now, because of injury and age and also other things, I don't skate as much for myself anymore. If I teach skating or in therapy, I have also the other person around me. So I lost this aspect a bit of being involved with my, Ian board, and he mentioned that so nicely, on how sometimes the board feels like just an extension of the body.
Yeah, sure.
And that feeling, that's what I mean with humbleness, you can, and also respect, it helped me, I think without a skateboard, I would have not dared to travel to so many different countries. But because I knew I can make other friends by just having my board, and be in contact, not necessarily making friends, but I knew I could turn up at a spot and have a nice time with people there because we skate, so it's connection as well.
All right, well, thank you so much for all that. And let's wrap it up with some of these surprise questions then. Okay, let's do this first one.
Hey, Sophie. What's one of your best memories from the time you spent in Afghanistan?
Oh, that's Rhiannon.
Yes.
Oh, so sweet.
Rhiannon Bader from Good Push, right? And Skateistan?
Correct, yeah. Oh, nice. That warms my heart now. Wow, thanks for asking, Rhiannon. That brings me right back to that moment when you arrived in Kabul and we were skating in front of the American embassy in that blue fountain. That was a very special moment. I think that's one of my favorite moments. And also riding around on the back of the motorbike and teaching in Makrian and going snowboarding in Salang Pass. That was also very nice. I think the welcome, and I felt always very welcome with Skateistan. There were Ollie and Rhiannon, Ollie and Shana and Max were the people who were there when I arrived, and I felt right at home. It was very sweet. Very kind people.
Was Rhiannon also over there at that time, or did she? Because I know she's been involved with Skateistan and the Good Push Alliance for a long time now, but I'm not sure. How did you cross paths with her? Was it around that time? Was it a bit later?
Yeah, it was. She came, I think, just before I left the first time. Yeah, she was. She arrived with her friend Erica. They came together, and so I can't remember how, but she was there also very much from the beginning. But I think she came when I left.
Okay, so you crossed paths, kind of.
We crossed paths the first time, and then we met a bit more longer the second time I was there.
Well, on that same kind of topic, I have another question. Let's see.
Hi, Sophie. Ollie from Skateistan here. What did it feel like to be the fastest woman on a skateboard?
So I read about this in the book and I couldn't believe it. So please tell us that story.
Yeah, that's funny. Only is exaggerating, of course. I was never the fastest woman, but I was quite
Pretty
fast.
up there, yeah.
Yeah. I used to also do downhill skateboarding, and I think just before I came to Kabul, I was skating a bob track. So we had longboards in Altenberg in the bob track sledge tunnel. It was a Red Bull event at Beton on Fire. And I was there with my team at the time. I was sponsored by Hackbrett Longboards, or also it was Hügelherzblut, so it was the heart for the hills called.
Okay.
There was a women longboard company, and they both sponsored me, and we went on a team trip up there. And there were a couple of other people as well, like Patrick Switzer and some other downhill skaters. And Hack from Hackbrett Longboard, he was my team manager back then, and we all went into his van and skated that bob track. And that was literally a couple of weeks before I came to Kabul. So, and that was it's like you're in this tunnel. There's the bob sledge tracks are people, how from the Olympic ice skating, sledging thing. And then there's this big bend, so you have to really be in your track. You can't brake. You have longboard wheels, and after every sort of meter and a half is a boom, 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 because there are gaps that are just, you need quite big wheels to make the gap.
Yeah.
And that was, I think, the most amazing experience I did on my board. We took it very carefully. We started from the bottom, worked our way up, and then they had this lights, green and red, and then green you were allowed to go, and you had to focus so much. It was such a mind fuck. You really had to be present.
Oh yeah, for sure. Did you slam at all during those? You didn't fall too hard on one of those tries, or?
Yeah, I did quite well. I luckily I didn't hurt myself. I did fall once, I think. Unfortunately, at the same day, somebody broke the collarbone, and another one had a puncture on the lungs and broke the jaw. But that was because the pinkin broke in the middle of a big corner. So that was a very unfortunate accident.
Okay.
Yeah, and then we had to decide if we continue or not. It was an event where we got invited, and then there was the TV and the local press, and people came to watch. And then, do we continue, or do we say, everyone, we stop now? And we decided to we all were trained. We all did video simulation. So we watched the track on where the corners are, because you get quite fast on there. And you can't brake, so you really had to know where to bend. And so we decided to continue, and it was. I don't need to do it again now. I think I'm not in the training. I don't have the power in the core power at the moment. But after you go so fast, you can't brake. You just have to trust the process. Basically, you let the universe to you. Of course, we were not allowed. We're not total chaos, and we had to do some questions in order to be allowed to be accepted to the event. But this moment of letting go, and then coming out on the other side, there's a steep hill up, so it helps you brake. And I never took any chemical drugs, but I can imagine it feels similar from what I heard people talk about.
Oh yeah.
But it was such a endorphin rush. It was amazing.
I bet, yeah. And so I think in the book you said you were around 80 kilometers an hour. Did I get that right?
Oh, that was not on the bob truck. And the bob truck I was about more 70, I was or 60, I can't remember. It wasn't very fast, and it felt super fast because it's so narrow. And it was definitely over 60, but the 80 that was on the World Championship in Kazakov.
Okay.
Yeah, that was sort of 83, I think, was my fastest. And that's slow now, people on a longboard, they go 100 plus.
Oh my
Back
God.
in the day, that was fast. I think I was 6th in, but from the women, or 4th in, I can't remember.
It's incredible. That's giving me anxiety just thinking of going that fast on a skateboard. My God, that sounds terrifying.
No, it's magic, because the trick is, the faster you go, the slower you have to react. Because even the little finger, if you stick your finger out, the wind catches on, and you get.
It's gonna mess up your whole balance, and yeah. I have a quick second one from Oliver. Let me play for you.
What is your craziest memory from working with Skateistan in Afghanistan?
So it's kind of similar to what Rhiannon asked, but I guess what would you say is the craziest memory? Not necessarily the best one, but like something a little crazy.
Yeah, that's nice that Oli added the crazy, because the first thing that comes to my mind is the first skate session I had in the skate park.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I just arrived, and I actually I shared the story earlier on how I arrived, and then we went to the skate park, and there was this delegation, and there were some dudes with massive weapon in the back. I didn't know what they were, some throwers of something, and there were Kalashnikovs and these people in the Afghan traditional clothes, and I just flew in. I was actually on a funeral of my uncle the day before. And then, I haven't really arrived in Kabul yet. It was total crazy. Yeah. And then the coffee and the little sleep, I came off the flight and we went directly to the skate park. So that was special.
Hectic, I'm sure.
And amazing and crazy as well. Yeah. And after that, because Ollie asked about the crazy, and I think after that we learned pretty fast to not let weapons allowed in the skate park. So we had the policy to not have weapon in there, but that was sort of a crazy moment. We had to readjust to the new situations.
Okay, let's do this next one from Adelina Ong. So she said, because Sophie wrote about combining Gestalt therapy with skateboarding, I'd love to find out if Sophie has found/created new movements, practices, or other movement therapies that advance the practice she was developing in skate world.
I find that question a bit difficult to answer because I'm very much I don't work with pre-subscribed methods. So it doesn't happen often that we do the same thing twice. Mm-hmm. So with every client, it's like I'm inventing a new type of therapy according to their needs. So the tool, of course, the skateboarding is involved, but sometimes the skateboarding is a train over several sessions, or sometimes people like the chair work, then we do a lot of these chair works. Sometimes often we do a combination of different things. Mm-hmm. And this was very recently the book, right? So I think what I wouldn't say I developed some sort of technique where I can say we do ABC this next time, because I work also with what the clients bring me on the day, and I can't really predict what he brings or she brings. Mm-hmm. But what I can say is that I got more specialized in working with certain groups of symptoms that show up. Like we are planning for this coming year, we're planning therapy for kids on the autism spectrum, which I used to do a bit there, a bit there, but so we're going to have a specific group for that.
Okay.
And since the book, we also do specific groups on 4 to 5 year olds who grew up in Corona lockdown, more like 3, 4, 5 year olds. They're kind of single children often. They were born during the lockdown, so for them it was very overwhelming to be in the kindergarten and having other people around.
Oh yeah.
So we did stuff there to help them, ease with other people they don't know. So it was with more contact work.
Okay.
And yeah.
All right, let's see. Oh yeah, let's do this one.
Hi Sophie, good job on making it to Beyond Boards. We've discussed this before, and you also know how much I appreciate your work. But I gotta ask once again, in how far are the settings you work in? So the Gestalt therapy and your earlier piecework, skateboarding specific. We all have learned from your writings how skateboarding provides a valuable pedagogic approach, especially for children and adolescents. But couldn't this also be achieved by other sports or youth cultures? Greetings from Germany.
Nice. Yeah. Hi, Ben. It's a bit of a trick question, because I think we talked about that. Well, not trick question, but it's a nice thinking question, because, of course, this can be reached with other sports as well, but not to the same extent. And I couldn't do it. So I think it's, if I would be as a therapist, for me, the skateboarding is one tool I have. And I dare to say that it is a very different experience if you use skateboarding or football. Mm-hmm. The cultures around skateboarding and football are very diverse, very different. There is also more grassroots-based stuff, there's more DIY stuff, but there's also very commercial stuff in both sports, in all sports. So it's so, but I would say why I chose Gestalt in skating is because I see a lot of similarity. There's the art part in it. There's also it doesn't like to get pinpointed down, to be defined into one certain box. It's very I'm more than that. And what I feel like with skating, it's this individual freedom, it's very expressive also. And that's, for my way of therapy, important, because one lesson one pill, sort of, say, if you would ask me what pills do I have, or what is my medicine, I would say I like working with freedom. Mm-hmm. Helping people to find their own freedom, to maybe sometimes whatever that means, that is also very open, but skateboarding can also be freedom, freedom from traditional roles, freedom from the everyday, freedom from, just feeling the air on your skin, or like playing. And I feel we don't play enough as adults, especially German is very rigid, and that's how you're supposed to be a real adult. And then I come and, with the often clients call me and saying they're interested in skateboarding because they want to try something new. They want to experience themselves in a different way. As, for example, mothers who feel mothers and they want to step out of their comfort zone.
Yeah,
but also,
yeah.
I had a head teacher the other day who contacted me, who said, I work with young people, but I don't really know what it feels to be young anymore. I would like to get back in contact with that young part of me to also be more free and flowing. So I think that's another sport. I think that that's special on skateboarding, that also that it takes so long to learn for most people, and the risk of falling. Critics in the therapy world saying it's dangerous to do skateboard therapy because the client can fall. And yes, that's a possibility. But a client can also fall when steps out of the therapy room, or even slip in the room or down the stairs. So I mean, risk is inevitable there, and so. Mm-hmm. I hope I answered Ben's question.
No, I think so. Yeah, for sure. No, it's interesting. Yeah, and there are definitely some specific attributes of skateboarding that make it very special compared to other sports. And Yeah,
and I think one extra thing, which I think is quite nice, is for somehow skateboarding, and I think maybe other sports as well, if you have your fans and your idols, there is this bubble of mist, or of, like I think I shared it before in the podcast, this sort of protective code, where I feel like kids who have quite a low self-esteem, also adults actually, it can help them to get a bit of that vibe of skating, to feel more secure in themselves if they can. It's not for everyone, but sometimes it can give, the power of skateboarding can also give individual people power to feel more stable. And also body-wise, when I started skateboarding, I suddenly noticed I'm much better in responding to things that come to me. If somebody would throw stuff, I can grab it, or I'm much more, you can react fast.
I was just mentioning earlier how I loved skating, just rolling around and stuff, and that's one aspect that I loved very much, is how you basically, it's not just about rolling, it's kind of just absorbing the environment and whatever's coming your way. Whether it's a car coming towards you, I don't know, a dog or something, like you have to pay attention to everything, and you're very super alert and kind of in that mind state. I like that very much. You're very focused.
Yeah, and I think this is so interesting, because if you skate a lot in a skate park and you don't have cars anymore, you become less sensitive to that. And I think, on a football pitch or a basketball court, it's very safe environment. You just have the activity you do. But if you're in the city, there's glass, there's debris, there are stones, there are other people, there are pedestrians, everything. So you're much more aware.
All right, let's do this next one from Ian Borden. Let's see, he said, you have worked with skateboarding to help people with challenges that lie outside of skateboarding itself. Is the very simplicity of the skateboard, a basic bit of kit, and the act of skateboarding, push and ride, essential to this process? What is it about the act of skateboarding which works so well for empowerment beyond the board?
Oh, beautiful question, Ian.
Yeah, he's good with words.
Yeah. I think I touched a bit on my previous answer, this invisible coolness, or maybe it's quite visible. But for kids, when they see us skateboarding, it's like, wow. Also, I have a group of kids from school with special needs, and they also have bad bodily impairments. And for them, they're also like, wow. And then allowing them to be part of the skate world is like opening a channel in themselves somehow to suddenly dare much more in life. I had the feedback of one of the teachers that I have this class I work with since 4 years now, and on last summer holiday he was saying the kids they grew just by, you know, suddenly their self-esteem, their awareness, it just he could have never achieved that in the classroom. And it's part of the culture thing, I think, or that image that is around skateboarding.
Mm-hmm.
And also maybe this fine balance between risk and achievement, you know, because you could always fall, even if you think you're a good skater, and there could be a little pebble and woo.
Yeah.
And that's a thrill that makes it exciting somehow. So you're super alert. You have to pay attention, and that gets you in the zone. And then, I mean, I start skateboarding in my sessions before I do the therapy work, because it builds connection, you know. Also body-wise, you are in a rush, you have adrenaline, you have joy. And from trauma therapy, we know it's very important to be able to, we call it pendel in German, to switch between, or like to regulate yourself from an uncomfortable moment to a more pleasant moment. And I feel like the skating is sort of also the pleasant moment, the joy, the lightness. And then you look at the pain of your parts, like of your mind, of the points where you feel stuck or trapped. And then knowing, you also have a lightness. I also have to remind clients sometimes, hey, there's also joy. Look, the playfulness allows often deeper process. And I feel that is happening a lot, that people also can open up on a deeper level, because they also had the possibility to extend, you know, with joy. And sort of when you look at enlightenment, of how does enlightenment work, it's like, of course you can take drugs, you can meditate, but you can also have experience that bring you in the state of flow, where your awareness expands, where your consciousness widens. And then if you look at pain, your consciousness is often very and you narrow down to a specific aspect. And I think their skating is special, or maybe also other movement-based therapy where you experience and then you have more capacity to also dive deep into the pain, and you can hold the pain better because you can get out of it. You know, there's also joyful moments.
All right, I have just a few last ones.
Hi Sophie, dear friend. Got a couple of questions that I think would be great for you to answer and share your insights with the listeners. First of all, what is truly the art of living sideways? Tell us what you think about that. And secondly, how does chair work correspond with skateboarding as a therapeutic tool? Sending lots of love. Bye.
Oh, nice. Thank you, Paul.
Wonderful, Paul O'Connor.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, I still don't, like, the most simple question is, what is the art of living sideways? Now, just spontaneously, it came up love. You know, the love for life, the love for other humans. I wrote a whole chapter in my book trying to understand the art of living sideways. Mm-hmm. And I was very cognitive back then and looking at philosophy. But I think my point then and still now is that, you know, I'm German. People are making fun out of German mentality of being very rigid and serious and bam, straight. And I feel like the art of living sideways is bringing joy into that rigidity and loosening up a bit, you know, and and that then corresponds somehow to love for me just now. That was a spontaneous answer. I'm not sure if it makes sense. But if somebody's interested, cool. I can read the chapter. I try to really slice it up and make it understandable. Mm-hmm. I think it's daring to be different. I think our culture needs diversity. And I think that's also the art of living sideways, daring to be the person who look sideways, stand sideways, roll sideways, to shake things up a bit, to look at, to not have it so uniform the whole time.
Think outside the box, yeah.
Exactly, yeah.
And what about his second question about chair work and how it corresponds with skateboarding as a therapeutic tool? I mean, we did mention it a little bit earlier, but we didn't talk too much about chair work. Yeah,
I don't have that much to add because I feel like we picked it up quite well earlier. But it's for me, the chair work it doesn't make much difference if you do it in a therapy room or if you do it in a skate park. It's a tool or a methodology. There are books about it, how it works, that help people to make sense of their experience, especially if things are unclear. And it's a way of inviting healing to the body, to the human organism. And I just swapped the setting. I just didn't invent anything new. I'm just using an existing technique because some of my clients wouldn't be able to come to a skateboard room, a therapy room. It's white, it's sterile. No, my room is very nice and very welcoming and warm. But it's one person like me as a therapist and them. And for especially if you're people on the autism spectrum, it's very stressful to be in a room, to be in this direct contact, to be in alone contact with me. So it's easier for them to meet me outside, and then you can, so it's...
Okay, I have two last ones.
Sophie, I'm so hyped to listen to your Beyond Boards episode. I loved your book, Art of Living Sideways. I guess that was like a decade ago. And how you used skateboarding as a medium for pro-social good and even therapy, like physical therapy. But growing up in the 80s and 90s, skateboarding was antisocial. Almost something parents sent their kids to therapy for. Ironically, it's that outsider energy that drew me in as an angsty kid. I just want to know, do you think those negative and rebellious dimensions are still important for skateboarding today? I just wonder if that stigma, in a strange way, gives kids like me a place to land, and whether losing it changes what skateboarding is or who it's for. I look forward to your answer. Thanks.
That's Brian Glennie.
Ah, yes, of course. The brain. I called him once Brain by accident. Sometimes I have difficulty with names and then pronouncing the English words properly, and then because he's Brian and then Brian. Anyway, that's I think that's the essence of why it works so well. Kids who come to therapy, they somehow feel something is not right with them. Kids and adults, Everyone. I think nobody I think one process of therapy, or if people, I think it's important for me to say I like to create spaces where healing can happen. I know that I can't, sometimes I wish I could, but my limitation is that I can't heal anyone. I can help, I can assist that their own healing capacities kick in space.
Right.
And for me, healing is accepting yourself, accepting or loving even your differences. And because we are so survival driven as humans, we back in the Stone times, we needed community, we needed other people to survive. So if we are the outcast, there is a danger that we might not survive. And I feel a lot of kids who come to therapy, especially with the kids, they are the outcasts. And I know well enough what it means to be an outcast. So I love outcasters. And I feel like a lot of skaters also feel like something is not quite right with them. Sometimes it's wrong. Now, I think this shifts a bit, but definitely the old skaters have that experiencing. You are the weird one with the ripped pants and the limping or the scratched elbow,
Yeah.
Especially as a woman, I was sitting there in my therapy training and having pizzas on my arm, And it's like, what's wrong with that woman? Can't she walk properly? Yeah. So, and now I can laugh about it, but when I was suffering from feeling different or not feeling correct, I was so ashamed of being not right or not fitting in. So I have a special heart for people who go through similar things. And I think, skateboarding unites, and skateboarding also sort of the subculture, if we call skateboarding a subculture thing, it becomes very interesting because a subculture can only exist if you separate yourself from other cultures. And there is this aspect of distance and not connecting with certain type of people, either because this sort of bit of gatekeeping thing, which I experienced sadly because I'm super not cool with my kids, People said to me things like that I'm making skateboarding less hardcore and less cool because I skate with kids, so of course I also wear helmet and safety gear, and that's always a topic. And then I'm diluting the skateboard culture and I'm letting everyone in and I'm not keeping the core. So I get all this bullshit.
It is bullshit. It's just useless blabbering.
It's bullshit, and there is also something important about it, because I think the core is important. But I think the core is I think in order, especially nowadays, with the politics going on, I think we need to remember that there are different types of course, and the diversity and the multiplicity of things make things complicated and overwhelming. So I understand the need of people to simplify and break it down to basics and make it short Instagram snippet that it seems very logical and understandable, but some things in life are too complicated to break down to such basic black and white things. And
Yes.
I think it's good to be able to separate from certain things and say, hey, like, but then that's the path, I guess, people go to find or also love themselves if they feel or respect themselves in their differences and value the differences rather than hitting your head because of it.
Mm-hmm.
Because the difference can, in the brighter, broader society, add more color and make a more colorful picture or a more diverse, if you look at the crop and the apple, we used to have thousands of different types of apple or different bananas even, and now in the supermarket you just get the big big yellow bananas and 5 types of apple, and it does something it kills a lot of biodiversity. But if all the skaters are just the street skaters, it also takes a big lump out of history and decor as well.
Yeah.
And decor was also always welcoming if you look at, before word skating, there were always women involved as well. It was,
sure.
There's...
No, exactly. I mean, the guys who are saying this, because it's mostly guys, I assume, they're just like dinosaurs facing extinction. They're just seeing the comets coming towards them, and this just their last attempt at screaming into the void or something. It's useless. No need to pay attention to it. But
I try not to take it too
serious.
It's
not worth your time and energy, for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, let's wrap it up with this very last one.
Hello, Sophie. Hi. So, how would you see your current work as peace work and contributing to a peaceful coexistence? And further, what do you think the world needs today?
I have no idea who that is.
That was Rosalie Kubni. I hope I'm saying
her
name
really?
Right. Yes.
I thought it sounds like her. I was like, you can't have asked her.
I tracked her down and knocked on her door. Yes.
Oh wow! Amazing.
I saw you mentioned her in the foreword, I think, of the book, and you said you were very close. So I just knocked on her door, and she contributed this very elegant question.
Yeah. Yeah, we actually lost contact a bit over the last year, so this is very special now to hear from her. And I think what we talked about was a lot of my peace work, accepting diversity, accepting differences, and thinking in colors and not so black and white. I think that's my current peace work. And what I think the world needs today is understanding for complexity and a nervous system that can deal with complexity.
Yeah.
I think we are very fast. It's easy to be drawn to fast answers. If you see politic-wise people who promise fast and easy answers, they have a lot of followers. Because I think there's a fear when everything gets so multiple and so diverse and so complex that things are not controllable anymore. And I feel like I'm loving the chaos. A skate park is chaos and it works still quite well. And I think the world needs more trust in chaos. And I think being in Kabul, it taught me humanity and kindness to strangers.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like that's also something that the world can do a bit more. A nervous system that can deal with complexities. I think I wish that everyone. The world is so much more simple when we don't react so fast, and because often we react because we're scared and we're in the need of protecting ourselves. And also, one of my favorite quotes is from Ivan Illich, and he says there's a space between reacting and responding. So every time you get a response and you have the choice to choose your reaction.
Yeah.
You can, and the four sort of basic reaction we humans have is flight, fight, freeze, or I call it obey, but it's not the right word in English, where you're like a dog, you're trying to adapt to the situation. Please don't do me harm, I'm being a kind person.
Yeah.
There's also the 4 mechanisms that happen to us automatically as humans. We all have the capacity to act in these 4 ways, and learning to bring a bit of space in that automatic reaction, not freeze immediately because that's how we learned it, or you know, when you're scared, you tend to freeze, or we as humans tend to freeze or fight. Certain people prefer to fight or run, but to hold in for a moment and allow a space before you respond. I think that's what we also need. Yeah. Wow, I'm still a bit overwhelmed that you asked Rosalie. How cool is that? Thank you. Thank you, Rosalie, for taking the time.
Thank you, Rosalie, and all the other people who contributed questions. And thank you, Sophie, for spending quite a bit of time with me. It was a wonderful conversation. I enjoyed it very much. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for your interest and for asking me.
That's it for my conversation with Sophie. Check out her book, The Art of Living Sideways, as well as her chapter in the Skate World's New Pedagogies for Skateboarding book, which we talked about. And make sure to follow her on Instagram @DropInRideout to keep an eye on her upcoming projects. Thank you for tuning in. See you soon for a new episode of Beyond Board.